Hello, so I'm going to talk about the nitrogen cycle. So we need to know, why is the nitrogen cycle important, and how does it affect us, and how does it really work? So maybe we should ask, why do we need nitrogen? Well, we need nitrogen first to make DNA, we need it to make RNA, and we need it to make amino acids, okay? So everything in the world, everything living organism in the world needs nitrogen to do these things. So I'm going to start off with the inputs of nitrogen into regarding the soil nitrogen cycle, and then we're going to talk about how that transforms, and then we're going to talk about the losses. So the first stage really is the right here is going to be the, I'm going to use a highlighter, is going to be the nitrogen fixation process. Okay, we're going to start off with that. Okay, so once we get nitrogen from the air, and it's important to note that 78% of nitrogen is found in the atmosphere, and because they have really strong bonds, um, this is why this process is so important, because plants can't just break it down by themselves. They need help from this other bacteria, which I'll talk to a little bit more detail, called rhizobia. And rhizobia, we'll just put an R right there, has a symbiotic relationship, but we will talk about that in a bit. So once we have organic nitrogen right here, the microbes and the fungi will break down they'll actually mineralize the nitrogen into ammonium. Then again, they'll break it down in several ways, right? Several things can happen once we hit this ammonium stage. We can lose it, but we'll talk about that later, or they can be immobilized. So what that means is they'll reconvert the ammonium into, it's the opposite of mineralization. They're going to convert the ammonium into nitrogen. Okay, and so from that, we ask ourselves, well, why is that important? Well, if there's too much organic residue that with nitrogen in it, then it stays in the soil. Okay, it'll stay. But if not, if there's not enough, then it will be collected into a biomass in the soil. Okay, so microbes will basically add it to their biomass. From there, um, so if it's not immobilization, then it can the ammonia can be broken down again by microbes into nitrite, which this process is called nitrification. Nitrification is breaking down the ammonium into nitrite and nitrate, and then it is assimilated. It can be assimilated by the plants again with that Rhizobia bacteria helping to break down the nitrates and exchange it in for ATP for other resources that they both need. So it's a symbiotic relationship. So that is it. That's the key point. So that's how we get the nitrogen transformed into the soil, and a little bit of the output. In terms of how do we lose nitrogen, we can lose nitrogen from a couple ways. One way is through denitrification, right? Denitrification essentially is we're using waterlogging or flooding, which is basically contributing to the anaerobic activity or anaerobic environment, where if you imagine these are pores or these are soil particles and whatnot, and you're flooding it, right? There's no more oxygen in here, and if there's no more oxygen in there you have this bacteria, right? Bacteria, this denitrifying bacteria that breaks down the nitrates and releases it in the form of NTO, right? Nitrous oxide. So another loss, so that's one loss. Another loss is leaching, which it can get into groundwater. So now you have all these nitrates, which I'll just do N. So we don't want that if we're drinking that water. If we're doing a lot of irrigation, this is a problem, because if we're using a lot of fertilizer, you're adding all of this nitrogen that is not probably going to be fixated unless you have enough plants. And because of that, that will also end up in the underground water aquifers and whatnot. And again, it can be washed out to sea, where you get eutrophication, which will lead to algae blooms in the ocean, because you're adding nutrient overloads, which will basically deprive the oxygen or limit oxygen in the ocean, or take away oxygen. It'll develop. It'll have these reactions that get rid of oxygen. So we don't want that. And then lastly, volatilization, which I had touched upon, basically is when if you were adding too much fertilizer, you're going to get a pH that is probably high, and if it's greater than 8, it makes it very acidic, and so that can be released back into the atmosphere in the form of NH3, which is just another gas. So solutions that include crop rotation, agroforestry, and just not using fertilizer, right? A lot of these problems can be eliminated if we just don't do fertilizing and agriculture in a way that is just leaching all of these unnecessary um, nitrates, and chemicals. And so, yeah, and crop rotation, to quickly touch on that, essentially we're adding water. We're breaking up these molecules, right? We're letting more air instead of having, tightly spaced soil. We're breaking that up and allowing more oxygen and water to filter through. So those are some benefits if we choose not to engage with relying on fertilizer.